For those of you that missed the title screen, this video presentation is going to teach you tech enthusiasts in the audience how to build your very own personal computer. I say tech enthusiasts for a reason. There's a bit more knowledge and skill required than what is shown in the film. We're so good that we make it look that easy. If you are capable, we totally recommend doing it. You can customize it in an endless number of ways, and it will typically be cheaper than whatever you go out and try and buy pre-built. It only takes an hour to assemble, and all you really need is a screwdriver and a table. We'll guide you through the entire process over the next few minutes. I hate to keep you on the edge of your seat, but there's a little bit of preparation you need to do before starting though. First, you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver, which you should have. This may come as a surprise, but that's honestly the only tool you'll need. Don't spend like $50 on an overpriced toolkit like our school did. Additionally, you might want to invest in zip ties to help organize the computer's internals, but we won't use them in this build because we didn't really have any. You'll also need to make sure you have enough space to do this. We actually set up a small folding table for this, but really, we'd recommend just cleaning off some table and working on it there. And finally, we should go over the least important part of the pre-build, safety. The only hazard in play is static electricity, which, unless you follow these simple tips, could fry some of those oh-so-pricey parts you totally didn't steal from Best Buy. 1. Avoid building near or on carpet, and 2. Make sure you touch something metal before starting. Yes, that's it. Congratulations, you're now an expert on static electricity. Alternatively, if you're into luxury wristwear, you could pick up one of these fancy anti-static wrist straps to keep all your shit safe, although I'm not sure if Rolex makes them. Okay, legal disclaimer done. Let's get to the action.
See, a computer isn't just one thing. It's a compilation of lots of different things. You got motherboards, memory, video cards if you're spending a lot of money or doing some high dollar things. Lots of pieces go into making a computer.
First is the motherboard.
The motherboard is this really large green piece here. It's like the backbone of your computer. Everything is going to hook up to it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Basically, it's the thing that everything else connects to. They're pretty cheap, roughly $100 if you don't buy overpriced stuff, but you need to make sure that all your other parts are compatible with it. The next thing you'll want to pick is the CPU. It's the heart of the beast. It sits in the motherboard and basically controls everything. Your CPU has to be compatible with the motherboard, and you have a range of options trading out performance and price, since, for the sleek gaming rig we're building, it'll be the second most expensive part. There are two main brands of CPUs, Intel and AMD. There are differences between the two, but it's complicated and not necessary to know for this build. What's important though is that the motherboard you buy supports your CPU. An Intel CPU needs an Intel compatible motherboard, and the same is true with AMD. Don't worry, we've already checked that stuff. We're experts, you know. CPU installation is simple. All we have to do is lift this metal lever to open the socket, line up the triangle on the corner of the CPU with the one already inscribed there, and gently drop it into place. Then, to ensure it doesn't just fall out, we press that metal bar back down with a bit of force. Okay, now that we're done with the CPU, we're going to move on to the RAM.
Computers also need memory. Memory is often referred to as RAM, and this is like short-term memory for your computer. It's going to store all the information you're currently working on. When you save a file, that goes to your hard drive. This is different than that. This allows your computer and your CPU to think a little harder. RAM is not as particular, but still does have to match your motherboard. It comes in different speeds and different sizes. So these are 4 gigabyte. You can get 8 or 16 gigabytes to make your computer faster.
To install RAM, you press back these tabs here, and just stick the RAM in and push down. The tabs will push back in, and they will be in securely. Pretty easy, eh? Okay, motherboard done. The next part of the build is the case. The case is what the entire thing sits in. It's the most defining aesthetic part of it, so people typically try and pick ones that don't make them want to vomit. The only actual requirement for picking this, though, is making sure that it supports the motherboard. Okay, now that we have the case ready, we'll put in the motherboard. With normal cases, there's these little raised points that it rests on, so we know that it will all line up correctly. We just need to align these and get screwing. Here we're connecting a few cables from the case to the motherboard for its USB ports and LEDs. Be sure to consult your motherboard and case manuals to see what you'll have to connect. Here we're installing the heatsink by securing it in the mounting system we have on the motherboard. You'll want to read up specifically on how to do this with your own heatsink because it can vary greatly. Here we're applying something called thermal paste. It's a compound designed to transfer heat to another thing called the heatsink. That heatsink, with the help of the attached fan, helps dissipate heat away from the CPU. Now we're going to install the power supply. The power supply is really what the name implies. It's the part of the computer that plugs into the wall and draws a certain amount of power from it for the system. Different systems will require different amounts of power, and, therefore, will need different power supplies. Expensive gaming rigs like the one we're building will need a higher wattage one than what a basic PC would require. We'll also be installing a GPU.
Okay, now if you're going to play a lot of games or you want really high video quality, you're going to want a graphics card. Graphics card allows you to add additional memory and power to your computer through a PCIe slot.
Essentially, it's a specialized card that sits in your motherboard and can easily be the most expensive part of your rig, maxing out at maybe $1,000 if you're trying to flaunt around your money. However, you typically won't spend nearly that much. To install it, you first need to remove this panel on the back of the case. Then you want to place it into the motherboard and screw it into the side of the case, ensuring that it does not become loose. You'll also need a hard drive. This is different from the RAM we talked about earlier, and that this is for permanent storage while that is temporary.
Hard drive, this is what stores all of your information, from operating system to your files and your pictures of cats and memes of Robin. So your important information is kept on here, so you don't want to cheap out on your hard drive. You need to make sure you have enough space in it, and if you're really looking for performance, you might want to invest the extra money in a solid state drive.
Now we're going to connect the hard drive. We'll take something called a SATA cable and plug it into both the motherboard and the hard drive itself. We'll also need to plug in one of the cables from the power supply so that, it can actually work. The case actually came with a fan, so we might as well use it to help cool down the system. Installation is incredibly easy. Once it's screwed in, we're just going to plug this little connector into wherever the motherboard manual says to. Okay, we finally have all its innards connected. All we have left to do is put that side panel back on, plug the power supply into the wall, and hope that when we hit the power button, something happens. The operating system is the last part of building your computer. It is the software that the computer uses to run its basic functions. Some examples of operating systems are Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and Chrome OS. We would recommend using Windows, as it's the most widely used and likely the one that you're most familiar with.
Operating system, that's what you see when you turn the computer on. If you're not on a Mac or a Chromebook, you're using Windows.
To install your OS, you need to simply put the disk or flash drive into your computer while it is turned off. Then, turn on your computer, and Windows will walk you through the steps of correctly installing it. Okay, recap time! Today we learned what each PC component does, how to choose parts that suit our needs for our computer, and how to assemble these parts in a correct and time-efficient manner. You now have the knowledge you need to construct your own personal computer that suits your specific needs. Thanks for watching.